Well, our big focus is the big deal in the desert. The United States and Saudi Arabia have signed a $142 billion arms deal. As US President Donald Trump said, Washington had no stronger partner than the Gulf nation. The first day of Trump's Middle East trip also saw a flurry of deals for US tech companies announced at the Saudi-US Investment Summit, the biggest of which was NVIDIA, which said that it would sell thousands of AI chips in Saudi Arabia. Now, for years, the US-Saudi Arabia relationship, it's actually revolved around oil and defense. But this week's state visit by Donald Trump to Riyadh strongly signals a pivot to technology. This as the regions find common ground not in petroleum, but in rich wells of investment capital. Trump's visit included an aerial escort by Saudi F-16 planes, as we covered, and a ceremony in the opulent Saudi royal court. And it was attended by the who's who of AI's high priests, including NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, Tesla CEO and first buddy Elon Musk, as well as leaders of Amazon, Google, Uber, among others. Trump has scored a symbolic victory at the summit when Riyadh's pledged to invest $1 trillion in the US. But that staggering number will test Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's ability to actually match their rhetoric with reality. But just listen in to some of the key highlights.
My fervent hope, wish, and even my dream that Saudi Arabia will soon be joining the Abraham Accords. I think it'll be a tremendous tribute to your country, and it will be something that's really going to be very important for the future of the Middle East. I want to make a deal with Iran. If I can make a deal with Iran, I'll be very happy. If we're going to make your region and the world a safer place. But if Iran's leadership rejects this olive branch and continues to attack their neighbors, then we will have no choice but to inflict massive, maximum pressure.
Meanwhile, the US president also said that he would lift all sanctions on Syria to give them a chance at greatness, a major shift in Washington's policy towards Damascus. But Trump's announcement in Saudi Arabia, which he suggested was actually influenced by Istanbul and Riyadh, came a day before he's set to meet with Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, a former rebel leader who helped topple Bashar al-Assad. Shara has been trying to woo Washington, reportedly telling a Trump ally that he wants a business deal and a Trump Tower in Damascus. Meanwhile, Western governments have largely been reluctant to ease restrictions on Damascus before the new leadership meets certain humanitarian as well as political conditions. Listen in.
I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness. Now it's their time to shine. It's their time to shine. We're taking them all off, and good luck, Syria. Show us something very special like they've done, frankly, in Saudi Arabia. Okay? They're going to show us something special.
And for further clarity, joining us live from California at the moment, Dmitry Zeblin, geopolitical strategist. Thanks so much, Dmitry, for making time for us on NDTV. Let's actually start with the optics versus outcomes. Donald Trump has announced $600 billion in deals with Saudi Arabia, yet the numbers provided by the White House amount to about less than half. So how should this gap be interpreted geopolitically? And is this actually about perception management, or are we looking at a genuine shift in US-Saudi economic cooperation?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think with a lot of these commitments and pledges, you can't really take it at face value. I mean, I know Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, said the investments can go as high as potentially $1 trillion. However, having said that, we have to see how much that actually is going to materialize. You may have supportive industrial policy, for instance, in the US or any other country for that matter, that doesn't guarantee that the growth necessarily will follow. What is promising from the Trump perspective, though, is you have to look at the domains through which they are cooperating. So one is military. I think they signed a $143 billion military aid package, which the White House claims is the largest military aid package ever signed. I haven't double checked that yet. I'm not sure if that's true. Another area of collaboration we may see is through energy. Energy is a really big one. Obviously, the U.S. has repeatedly talked about energy dominance. Obviously, that has been one of the areas through which Saudi Arabia and the U.S. have cooperated, a sort of arms for oil kind of paradigm. And then thirdly, the other avenue, and we're seeing this certainly reflected in the private markets as well, is increasing U.S. Really Middle Eastern, not just Saudi specific cooperation when it comes to data centers. And that's really the big one, is artificial intelligence. We may begin to see some export restrictions on some of NVIDIA's most advanced chips, their GPUs, like potentially the A100 and H100, potentially loosened to the extent that those loosened export controls would allow those chips to be exported to Saudi Arabia. And as part of their 2030 vision to diversify their economy away from oil, digitization is central to that strategy. So we may see more collaboration in that respect too, as along the technological front. So it's technological, it's in terms of energy, you may see more collaboration, and militarily. I would say those are the big three conduits because of how all of those actually intersect. They're all frontiers in the modern game of geopolitics around which supply chains are being politicized around.
But Dimitri, as a strategist, when you look at this mix of defense, AI, space, even wildlife conservation deals, is this a coherent long-term alliance strategy or a collection of opportunistic partnerships wrapped in showmanship?
I mean, I wouldn't say so, because you kind of have to follow where the money is going. And when you look at the capital that's being committed, you look at Stargate, which is, I think, being backed by SoftBank and is partnered with OpenAI to set up data centers in not just the US in terms of setting up AI infrastructure, but also you're seeing that set up in other countries that are aligned with US interests. Now, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia have not always seen eye to eye, obviously. There was a massive falling out between Biden and MBS after he labeled the Crown Prince, or rather, he wanted to make Saudi Arabia a pariah state. And of course, frosty relations there followed. So it's but even under those circumstances, we still saw Washington and Riyadh work hand in hand in a sort of bitter, albeit necessary marriage, you could say. Yeah. So I think that given the strategic implications of AI, both in a commercial context and with military applications, I think you're just going to see the basis of a lot of cooperation there. And it would further reinforce the commercial drive that seems to be behind a lot of Mr. Trump's policy proposals.
Right. Meanwhile, if we just focus on the Defense Pact, well, Trump has called it the largest defense sales agreement in history. Dimitri, but how do you read this in the context of the current regional security architecture, particularly with Iran, the war in Gaza, and also the U.S. troop presence in the Middle East?
Yeah, absolutely. So something I've written about before, and it's no way an endorsement, is that there seems to be tension within the White House between Steve Witkoff and Trump himself. And that rift we're seeing really manifest between the relationship between Trump and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been an Iran hawk for decades now. Now, if you were to look at the situation in Iran from an Israeli perspective, right, from a purely strategic one, again, this is not an endorsement of any kind, and this is something I actually wrote about a few months ago, that I believe that more likely than not, you will see an attempt at regime change between now and 2029 to the extent that you have three factors that make it ripe for regime change from likely the perspective of the Israelis, which is you have social instability in Iran. Most of the people there living in Iran do not like the current power structure in place. You have a lot of Iran's military assets that were decimated when we saw tensions escalate last year. And third one, although this one now is a little bit more precarious, is you saw hegemonic support. Now, Mr. Trump, and this was a surprise to me, has not actually been as hawkish on Iran as I was expecting. He seems to be more inclined to make a deal. To the extent that this falls in line with his more isolationist policy of not wanting to involve the U.S. in foreign wars, that makes sense. I think in terms of the broader security architecture, having that military package with Saudi Arabia is a way to sweeten the deal in order to have them join the Abraham Accords. Because Saudi Arabia stewards, let's not forget, Islam's two most holiest cities, Mecca and Medina. Yes. Having them recognize Israel formally would serve as a huge legitimizing force in the Middle East and could carry tremendous strategic value to Israel. But the Saudis know that, so they're not going to give it up easily. Right. So I think to that extent, if we do see Iran continue to try to enrich its uranium program past a certain threshold, at some point something's got to give, because a permanent stalemate is just simply not possible. At some point,
Right.
something has to tip one way or another.
Well, we'll be keeping a close eye on all the developments. Dimitri, as always, thanks so much for making time for us and joining us on NDTV.